from our participants, I think we can now begin, Dr. Ray, no?
Yes. Okay.
All right. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for this morning, who will be talking about instrumentation. And I'd like all of you to listen very carefully, because you will be needing this once you proceed to your thesis or dissertation writing. And as early as now, I'd like to inform everybody that we are employing synchronous and asynchronous classes. So this kind of activity that we are having today, right now, is a form of synchronous, because you are present and currently will be listening to the presentation of our speaker. But I'd like to inform everyone that I will be recording the presentation of Dr. Ray for the purpose of asynchronous learning, because not everyone would have a very good connection at home. So once they have a good connection, they would still have the chance to review, probably replay the presentation that Dr. Ray will be having this morning. So Dr. Ray, the Zoom platform is yours now. Jen, stop sharing muna si Dr. Ray para siya makapag-share ng kanyang PowerPoint. So before we begin, may I ask the participants to give me an emoticons. Kahit simpleng wave lang, meron bang wave ang emoticons? Okay, kahit simpleng thumbs up lang, para malaman natin if you are there. For our participants, may I request that the students who are listening today will have their thumbs up emoticons. Pwede po ba? Yun. Para malaman namin na nandito kayo, no? All right. And then later on, after the sharing of Dr. Ray, we will be having a short open forum, so that if you have questions related to the topic that is going to be discussed, Dr. Ray is very much willing to answer the queries or the questions that you will be raising later on. So yeah, sir.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and in particular to our dashing and debonair program head, Dr. Alvinoki. All our graduate students, doctoral and the masterate students, a grace-filled morning to all of you.
Good morning, sir.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning po.
Yes, good morning to everybody. I find it a great opportunity to be given this opportunity to have an academic exchange with you on a very important topic entitled Instrumentation in Research, Test and Questionnaire Development and Validation Processes. As we go on with our discussions, you will find out how important this topic is in writing, and not only writing, but in defending your thesis and dissertations. To all our co-teachers, the need for appropriate instrument in conducting a research is more pressing today more than ever. You know why? Graduate students who are about to defend their thesis or their dissertation manifest a lot of concern about the statistical analysis that they have to defend to the panel members. Well, actually, more substantive issues of your final oral defense will come from the methodology of the study, particularly on two important points. First is the appropriateness of the research instrument chosen, and second, the validity and reliability of the instrument. This is something that you have to defend very well to the panel members before you're given the go signal to finish your programs. Okay, so according to a famous social scientist, the research instrument, my dear friends, is defined as a technical device designed to obtain data and information requirements of a research problem. Essentially, it is a materialization of a research method. What does ZITE mean by this? For instance, the researcher may need a valid and reliable test if he wants to get information about the knowledge, the skills, attitude, and values of target respondents on a certain topic or certain issues. Or maybe the researcher needs a valid and reliable questionnaire in conducting a survey study. What other what other instruments are usually used or utilized in conducting a research? Ms. Akdalan, could you name one? Aside from test and questionnaire, what other research instruments are usually used in conducting a research? Anyone, please? How do you plan to gather your data and information requirements?
Doc.
Yes.
Like a scale.
Again.
Interview, sir.
Okay. One is conducting an interview with, particularly if you are doing a qualitative research. All right, that's correct, Ms. Akdalan. What else? Maybe you will employ
Survey, sir.
Survey is more of a research method. No? Usually, the survey is conducted using questionnaire. Generally, when you do a survey, you employ the use of questionnaire. No? Very common. It's either the test or the questionnaire that is used in dissertation and thesis writing. But you may also employ rating scales. And the procedures of developing the rating scales would not be very different or would not be very far from the procedures in developing a questionnaire. What I'm trying to say, my dear friends, is two of the most commonly used research instruments are test and questionnaire. And because of this, Dr. Nuki and myself decided to give you a comprehensive discussions on selecting appropriate tests and appropriate questionnaires for the writing of your dissertations or your thesis. The systematic development and validation processes of these two instruments are actually the main focus of our academic exchange this morning. On the topic, instrumentation in research, test and questionnaire development and validation processes. Of course, I don't like to miss that more often than not, Dr. Nuki and myself are encouraging our graduate students to make use as much as possible standardized instruments that have been developed, validated, and published in referee journal. That would be the best. But sometimes you work on a topic where you cannot find a standardized instruments that can serve as a data gathering tool. So in that case, you have no choice but to develop your own test or your own questionnaire. So this is what our meeting this morning attempts to address. Okay? So let's begin with some basic concepts. So when we talk about test, we mean employing a systematic procedures in which individuals tested are presented with a set of constructed stimuli to which they have to respond. By the way, advanced info, the participants need not jot down notes. You may find it difficult to take down complete notes. Anyway, I will be providing a full text of the lecture kay Dr. Nuki. So you can download or you can inquire from his office about the copy of the lecture material. Test is a type of measuring instrument whose general characteristic is that it forces responses from the test taker. And such responses are considered to be indicative of the test taker's characteristics, their level of knowledge, their attitudes, skills, and other domains. On the other hand, a questionnaire is a structured technique for collecting primary data in conducting a survey. So this is where, Myra, you were telling me the use of questionnaires in survey. So this is what we are saying. No? Normally in conducting a survey research, a questionnaire is a primary instrument that is used. It actually refers to a series of written questions for which the respondent provides answer. Okay? In my desire to present to you a systematic and orderly sequencing of the discussions, we will start with test development first. Okay? So what are the steps in test development or test construction? You will recall in your master or maybe even your college of education days that in constructing a test, the first step that we employ is actually test conceptualization. And what do we mean by test conceptualization? This actually means the need to specify the objectives of the test that you have to construct. In other words, you ask the question, what is the purpose of the test that you are going to develop? You have to consider including what the test is supposed to measure. Example, the test may be intended to measure level of achievements of students. So you prepare an achievement test, or maybe an aptitude test, or it could be an attitude test, an intelligence test. No? Of course, in measuring levels of intelligence, we have already standardized a number of standardized tests that can be used for this. So you need not construct one. No? Or personality tests. And it's important to remember that the test also includes how the outcomes will be used. Okay. Second step is to define the test universe. So when you say define the test universe, what do we mean by this? Technically, we mean preparing a working definition of the construct the test is expected to measure. You have to make a working definition or an operational definition of the construct. An operational statement regarding observable and measurable behavior. We have to include the boundaries of the test domains, like where the test will begin, or the coverage, no? The topics that will be included in the test. We need to identify also the test takers who would be using the test. Why? Because it is important to list the characteristics of the target respondents who will be taking the test, especially those that will affect how the test taker responds. And some examples of this include their educational background, their motivation. Better still, if you can include other characteristics like interests, attitudes. Here is an example. I once prepared an achievement test in the educational statistics. And as an example of specifying the characteristics of the test takers, I have done this description. Develop a test that measures achievements of education students in statistics, covering both the descriptive statistical measures, central values, dispersion, measures of locations, and inferential topics, specifically correlation and linear regressions and statistical inference. So you have to specify what the test should cover or include. Step 2 of the test is developing a test plan. Now, teachers are very familiar. I'm sure all of you are familiar when we say develop a test plan. What do we ordinarily or prepare when we say we develop a test plan? When you prepare the final examinations or the achievement test of your students, how do you develop the test plan? What is it that we construct?
Sir,
Your
we
guess?
use,
Again?
hello, sir. We use table of specifications.
Very good. That's very well said. No? Technically, we mean we have to prepare a table of specifications. In preparing the table of specs, there are different models that you may use. No? One of the more popular is Bloom's TOS model. And Bloom's TOS model, covers 6 levels of thinking. So you can see here, the knowledge level. What does C stand for? What does this C stand for? Level of comprehension. This one is, the first A is analysis, application. The S stand for
Synthesis.
synthesis, and finally, evaluation question. So later on, you will find out why you have to prepare the questions, in different levels of question formulations. This is the format of the Bloom's table of specification model. Categories of question formulations becomes an important issue in preparing the table of specs. Another model, of course, that you can make use of would be Anderson's table of specification model. Using Anderson's table of specification model, the Bloom's levels of thinking were revised by a group of researchers. I understand the group of researchers were students of Bloom's. Anderson, being the group leader, revised the 6 level of question dimensions and grouped them into 2. One is lower levels of thinking, and this includes questions that emphasize recall, o parang ito rin yung level 1 ni Bloom, knowledge level, identification, and comprehension level. The rest of the types of questions are categorized by the group in terms of higher level of thinking. And this means including the processes that require learners to analyze, to apply, to synthesize, and to evaluate. So if you do an analysis of the 2 models, Anderson's group only classified the 6 into 2 and developed a simpler TOS model like this one. Okay, so here you have the topics. Bloom's model contains this: the time spent in teaching the topic, the percent of time in teaching the topic, the number of items that will be taken from each of the topics, and the number of lower level questions and the number of higher level questions that will come from the different topics covered by the teacher. Okay, so makita nyo, ito lang ang difference, no? The 6 question levels of questions are now grouped into 2, the lower levels and the higher levels. Okay, there is another model that researchers can also make use of, and I'm referring to Brookhart's table of specification model. Using a Brookhart table of specification model, the questions will be prepared on the basis of KSAVs: knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values. In other words, competencies are the basis in developing the items. It will all depend on what your institution is using, what model your institution is using. So you have a choice: Bloom's, the other one is Anderson, and the third is Brookhart's. Before I go any further, do you have any question about the 3 TOS models? Are the 3 TOS models clear to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if there are no questions, I'll go to the next step. And the next step is actually choosing choosing the test format that will be adopted. Choosing the test format that will be adopted by the researcher. And I like to inform everybody that the most popular type of questions is the multiple choice type. Most tests use this consistent format. You will recall even board examinations in the Philippines are prepared using multiple choice type of examinations. Okay. Second, the researcher needs to specify also the administration and the scoring methods. So under this, the researcher has to specify how the test should be administered and scored, and should answer questions like, how will the test be administered? How long do the test takers have to complete the test? And should the test be given in a group setting or to individuals? And is there a particular weighting for each question? This has to be made clear at the very start. When you talk about scoring methods, there are actually two popular types. The cumulative models, you cumulate the number of questions answered correctly, and assuming that the items are given equal importance, then you cumulate the number of correct answers, and that serves as the score. The other one, of course, is the categorical model of scoring. So if we are done with the objectives of the test, we have prepared the table of specification using Bloom's, using Anderson or Brookhart model. The researcher is now ready to develop the test item. I like to emphasize to the group that the most commonly used format is a multiple choice type. When I say multiple choice type, the format consists of a sentence called the stem, which is followed by a number of responses, usually 3 to 5, of which only one is correct. Incorrect responses are termed as distractors or test distractors. A lot of creativity, my dear co-teachers, originality and knowledge goes into writing good questions. And here are some rules of thumb that may help. One is to identify item topics by consulting your table of specs. Parang Bible natin yan, ha? As we develop the test, we examine actually our table of specs. You put together questions that belong to the same category, like knowledge questions, put them under one test item, and then comprehension, analysis, applications, and so on. Be sure each item is based on an important learning objective. You can find it in the TOS also. And more important, have a very close look at these important guidelines. Write items based on the intellectual standards and values of logic, accuracy, precision of thought, and breadth of thought. I like to emphasize this. The researcher has to write items based on intellectual standard of values and values of logic, accuracy, precision of thought, and breadth of thought. How can you be assured that the tests that you have developed meet this particular criterion? Be sure the items have been well distributed to the different question dimensions. I mean the 6. What are they again? Knowledge question. The second is? Second level. Level 1 is knowledge question. Level 2 is? Comprehension question. Level 3? Analysis question. 4? Application. 5? Synthesis. Finally, evaluation. Okay, just to give you a ready reference. No? When we say knowledge question, this is defined as remembering the remembering of previously learned material. Kung maalala niyo yan, this is the kind of test that are usually mga definition-based. The answer can be drawn verbatim from the textbook. This may involve the recall of a wide range of material from specific facts to complete theories. But all that is required from the test taker is bringing to mind appropriate information, simply to recall. Okay? I have given an example for each, but I will not discuss it one by one because we may be short of time. No? Here is an example of a knowledge question. So if you download the full text of the lecture material, you will get the example for each type of question formulation. Okay, so that's the knowledge question. The second level is comprehension question. Comprehension question is defined as the ability to grasp the meaning of the material. And this can be shown by translating material from one form to another, maybe from words to numbers, by interpreting material like explaining or summarizing, by estimating future trends, or making prediction of consequences or outcomes. And these learning outcomes go one step beyond the simple remembering of material and represents the lowest level of understanding. Again, dear co-teachers, I will not discuss this, but I like to tell you that I have included an example of comprehension questions. All right, so you can download that later on. Let's go to the application or the level 3 question formulation. Application refers to the ability to use learned materials in new and concrete situations. This may actually include the applications of rules, methods, concepts, principles, laws, and theories. Learning outcomes in this area require a higher level of understanding than those other comprehension. Again, I have attached a sample application question that you can browse over later on. All right. The next level is what we call the analysis question. And this refers to the ability to break down materials into component parts so that its organizational structure may be better understood. And this may include the identification of the parts, the analysis of the relationship between parts, and the recognition of the organizational principles involved. Learning outcomes here represent a higher intellectual level than comprehension, because application requires an understanding of both content and the structure, the structural form of the material. Here is an example of an analysis question. Okay? And second to the last will be synthesis question. By this, I mean the ability to put together to form a new whole. This may involve the production. If you're a language teacher, this may mean the production of a theme or a speech. Or maybe you ask your students to prepare a plan of an action research. If you are teaching social sciences or maybe communication arts, or maybe a set of abstract relations if you are teaching mathematics. Dear co-teachers, learning outcomes in this area stress creative behaviors with major emphasis on the formulation of new patterns or structures. Here is an example of a synthesis question, okay, that you can browse over later on. Finally, the evaluation question refers to the ability to judge the value of the material. The judgment are to be based on definite criteria, which may include internal criteria or the organization of the material, or maybe a set of external criteria like relevance to the purpose. And the students may determine the criteria or be given them. Let it be emphasized that learning outcomes in this area are the highest in the cognitive hierarchy of question formulation. Why? Because they contain elements of all other categories, plus the conscious value judgments based on clearly defined material. Okay. So after knowing, here is an example of a evaluation question. Okay. There you can peruse it later on. If you don't have questions about the different types of question formulation, the next thing to talk about would be step 4. So let's recall. First, you formulate the objectives. Then you prepare the test plan or the TOS. And then afterwards, develop the test item. That's the third step. The fourth step, the researcher is now ready to conduct phase and content validation of the item. Okay. How do we differentiate phase and content validations? In your thesis, you have to make this clear in your chapter 3 or methodology of the study. My dear friends, when you say phase validity, this is done by examining the physical appearance of the test, examining the form, the style, or maybe you can even say look into the level of language used in the test. But when you say, usually yung phase validity is done by asking experienced and seasoned educators who has been teaching the subject for quite some time. While content validity is done through a careful and very critical examination of the contents. That's the basic difference. Phase validation, you examine the form, the style, or the physical appearance of the test. And I repeat, mga seasoned educators and practitioners are the ones doing that. When you say content validity, it means careful and critical examination of the contents of the test. And therefore, this has to be done by experts to find out whether or not the test reflects the curricular objectives. O medyo merong konting critical issue dyan. Ang common error ng mga researchers pag nagpapavalidate sila ng kanilang test is to invite seasoned teachers in their school. Okay lang yan pagka phase validity ang tinetest ninyo. But if it is content validity, if you are teaching, if you are preparing an achievement test in mathematics, you get a PhD in math, an MS in mathematics, a seasoned mathematics teacher, and maybe a supervisor of mathematics. Take note of the term experts. So it should not be anyone in the district may be invited, unless of course you have experts in the district. So I hope this is clear, no? Phase validity, makikita yan eh. How did you conduct the phase validity? How did you conduct the content validity? And who did the validation of the test? Malalaman dyan yan. I repeat, if it's content validity, invite experts. If it is phase validity, invite seasoned or practicing educators. All right. Now, when you, after conducting the phase and content validity, definitely you will end up with the experts in particular will offer or will give you comments, suggestions, and recommendations about the test items that was evaluated or validated. And step 5 is the researcher now is ready to revise the items based on experts' suggestion. This is what I'm telling you. The experts would normally offer comments and suggestions on the content, form, and style of the test. The test items have to be revised based on the expert suggestions. When you defend your thesis or your dissertation, pag sinulat ninyo dyan that the items were, the test was content validated by 3 experts. First question agad sa inyo, who are these experts? Second question, what significant comments and recommendations were given by the experts? Okay. And third question is, what did you do with the comments and recommendations? Kaya pagdating sa methodology of the study, you have to discuss it in full detail. No? Who are the experts? Their qualifications and professional competencies, the significant comments and recommendations given, and how were they addressed. That's part of step 5 ng test development. Okay, after incorporating the comments, the recommendations, the suggestions of the experts, you now put the test in its final form. Afterwards, you do not immediately administer it to your respondents, but you have to identify a tryout group. Normally, about a certain percentage of the population that is not included in your list of respondents. You have to try it out, and then the results have to be analyzed. When you do analysis of the test results, you need not analyze all the questions. You will only analyze the responses of the top 27% of the test takers and the bottom 27%. Why? Because the analysis and interpretations will be done on 2 levels. Analyzing the difficulty levels of the items and examining the discrimination power of each item. Analysis of the results of the dry run test involves determining the length of time in taking the test and the level of vocabulary of the learners. The analysis would also involve, this is very important, my dear colleagues, no? The analysis would involve establishing the test validity and test reliability. So this gives me the opportunity to discuss with you, when do you say the test is valid? And when do you say the test is reliable? In your thesis and dissertation writing, results of the test validity and the reliability will be placed in methodology, but all the computational aspects and the analysis aspects will be presented in an appendix. How do you do it? I'll give you some examples. How do we establish test validity? I'd like to inform you that there are 4 ways of establishing test validity. The first procedure is what we call content validity procedure. What does content validity mean? This means finding how well the sample test tasks represent the domain of tasks to be measured. Remember, in planning the test, you have to prepare an operational definition of the test constructs. Okay, so the test item will now be analyzed on the basis of this construct. Procedure, how do you do it? Compare the test task with test specification. Usually this is non-statistical, and this is done by the expert. Okay, ito nilagay dito, this is done in step 4. So you provide the experts a copy of your problems, your TOS, no? and other procedures about the test. And afterwards, you will request the experts to do the evaluation or establishing the validity of the items. This will be given to you. Non-statistical content validity procedure. Dapat you imagine when you choose experts, it's either 3 pag masteral kayo or 5 pag doctoral kayo. Dapat mayroong agreements yung experts. At least majority of the experts must agree that the test items possess content validity. So if you ask 3 experts, at least 2 must approve. For dissertations, kung 5 sila, at least 3 must approve. But all the recommendations of the 5 and the 3 will be incorporated. So this is the first procedure of establishing test validity. No? Second procedure is item analysis. If you ask me, this is a better way of establishing test validity. Why? An item analysis procedure, okay, provides answers about how well the test items are constructed in terms of difficulty level and discrimination index. Merong rule tayo sa measurements, evaluation, research, and statistics. The test item must be on instructional level. Should not be very easy, should not be very difficult. The item analysis procedures will give you an evidence based on the difficulty index and discrimination power of the test. How do you conduct an item analysis? Compute for the difficulty index and the discrimination index. Analyze and interpret the results. How is this done? I will give you a detailed example in a few minutes. Okay, let me just finish presenting to you the procedure. What is the first procedure na ginamit natin? Content validity. The second is, hello, with your co-teacher, second way of establishing test validity?
Item analysis.
Very good, item analysis. The third has something to do with criterion-related validity procedure. Criterion-related validity provide answers on how will the test performance estimate the current performance on some valued measures other than the test itself. How do you do it? Compare the test scores with an outside criterion. Then later on, use a Pearson correlation coefficient procedure to establish the correlations between the test constructed and the outside criterion. What is that outside criterion? If you are preparing an achievement test in mathematics, maybe there is a division test in math, or maybe there is a depth ed test in math that can serve as the criterion. You administer both tests and then you correlate the result. How do you apply the person R? I'll give you an illustrative example later on. And finally, construct validity. Construct validity establishes how test performance can be described psychologically. No? How do you do it? Compare psychological traits or factors that theoretically influence scores in the test. For example, if you constructed a critical thinking test, you may correlate it with the results of a creative thinking test. And then apply a Pearson correlation coefficient procedures to find out the validity of the test constructed. So look at that. A critical thinking test may be correlated with a creative thinking test. Psychological traits ang ina-analyze dito. So these are the 4. You will only choose one. You need not employ all of them. So to summarize, what is the first?
Content validity.
Content validity. Second,
Item
item analysis. Third,
Criterion-related
Validity.
right? And finally,
Construct
validity. Okay, thank you very much. Now I'm very happy that you are very active and you remember the different types of validity tests. Let's go to the next step. I said earlier, may bias ako sa item analysis. Kasi yung item analysis give the researcher a evidence-based quality of the test constructed, because it presents difficulty indices and discrimination indices, the indices of every item. How is this done? Here is the formula, a simple formula for computing the difficulty index of every item. All right. Difficulty index is equal to U plus L over N, where U is the number of students belonging to the high group who got the item correct. Kanina, nabanggit ko sa inyo, pag nag-dry run test kayo, halimbawa, 50 students were served as subjects ng dry run test, you will not analyze the scores of the 50 students. Rank the results of the test from highest to lowest. Tapos compute ninyo yung top 27% kung 50 item test yun, so that means mga 13. No? Yung top 13, scores ng top 13 students and bottom 13. Yung U, this is the number of students belonging to the high group, yung top 13 students who got the item correct. All right, I'll show you an example later. L, the number of students belonging to the bottom group who got the item correct. And capital N, the combined number of students in both groups. So that would mean 13 plus 13 is 26 ang capital N. Kung 50 ang nag-take ng exams. All right. While after applying the formula, you make use of a difficulty index table. Ito, gusto ko i-emphasize sa atin ito. What authorities are emphasizing, only items of average difficulty are very much acceptable in the final form of the test. Items that records difficulty index between 0.11 and 0.25 is interpreted as limited in acceptability, meaning relatively difficult. So that may be included, pero dapat i-modify. No? I-slow down ninyo ng konti yung language and the structure. When the item, the difficulty index is between 0.76 to 0.90, again, the difficulty index is interpreted limited in acceptability because the test is relatively easy. Meaning that may be included in the final form of the test after modifying or revising the item. Item with difficulty index of 0.10 and lower, not acceptable, outright excluded in the final test. Items that are very easy, meaning difficulty index is 0.91 or higher, is not acceptable, automatic, not included, rejected in the final form of the test. So, malinaw ba? You administer that, you dry run the test, tapos take about 50 students, rank the test from highest to lowest, kunin niyo yung top 27% and bottom 27%. Afterwards, compute the difficulty index. And the results is interpreted using this table. Okay? May question ba kayo sa difficulty index muna?
Answer.
Answer.
Okay. Thanks God I have a fast learners group. Ito yung discrimination power. Discrimination power refers to the ability of the test item to discriminate between high-performing and low-performing students. Parang ang ibig ko sabihin nito, you develop a test item. Then you give it to the students. The good members of the class got the item correct. How do you feel about that? And then yung poor members of the class did not get the item correct. So how do you feel about that? Kung ganun ang resulta.
Sad.
I repeat, in-administer ninyo yung test item, the intelligent members of the group got the item correct, the poor members of the group got the item wrong or did not get the item right. Anong feeling nyo?
Mix po.
What do you
Happy
mean
and
unique?
sad. Happy and sad po, Doc. Kasi happy po because the learned students, yung pong magagaling, nakuha nila. Pero po sad kasi po, medyo po tumaas yung, kumbaga po, yung level ng question. Kaya po, nahirapan po yung mga medyo
medyo the low performing, ano?
Below,
Parang if you ask me, parang I'm asking you, that's a normal situation, and teachers should not worry much about it. Di ba? Ganun ang normal na makakuha. Yung magagaling, makakasagot. At yung hindi masyadong magaling, maaaring mamali. Eh kung baliktarin natin yung sitwasyon, you construct a test item, in-administer ninyo, the poor members of the class got the item correct. And the intelligent members of the class did not get the item right. Anong feeling nyo?
Frustrated.
Perplexed, no?
Perplexed.
Confused. Ang ibig lang sabihin nun, the test item does not have good discrimination power. Hindi kaya mag-discriminate between high ability students and low ability students. So going back, technically, how do you compute for the discrimination index? You employ a formula, no? U minus L over small n. Yung U, kamukha din niya nung kanina sa difficulty. Number of students belonging to the high group who got the item correct. And L, number of students belonging to the low group who got the item correct. Yung N, the number of students in each group. Oh, I like to emphasize, baka magkamali kayo dito. Pag small n, number of students in each group. So in our example, kung 50, 13. Pero kung capital N, the number of students in both groups, 13 plus 13, 26 ang denominator ninyo. Nakuha ba? Sa difficulty, ang denominator ninyo ay 26 kasi capital N ang sinasabi ng formula. Sa discrimination power, small n, 13 ang inyong denominator. Siguro to amplify the points, let me give you, by the way, after applying the formula, this is how you interpret the discrimination power of the item. Item with discrimination index of 0.421 and higher are very acceptable item. Okay? Meaning it can fully discriminate between high ability and low ability students. Item with discrimination indices between 0.20 to 0.40 are acceptable. Okay siya. You can include it in the final form of the test. Items with difficult discrimination index of 0.19 and below is considered low-powered item and limited in acceptability. Pwede pa ding isama sa final form of the test, but it has to be reviewed, revised, no, improved. But item with zero power and negative power are not to be included in the final form of the test. Better 0.20. Ito ang aking cut-off dyan. 0.20 or higher. Siguro para mas maintindihan natin mabuti, let me give you an example. Tingnan nyo ito. Here's an example of a test. No? I got item number 1. So parang ganito yung magiging picture ng inyong item analysis table. Ito yung analysis of difficulty index, analysis of discrimination index, and final evaluation. Ito, item number 1. Multiple choice type. Correct answer is B. Medyo malurit ng konti, ano, pero very effective, very evidence-based. How many chose letter A from the high group? How many chose letter A from the low group? How many chose B from the high group? And how many chose B from the low group? C, how many chose C from the high group and the low group? And D, ganun din. Tingnan natin to. Ang correct option ay B. So, analyzing natin yung difficulty index. Ano nga yung formula natin ng difficulty index? Do you still remember what the formula is? U minus
L.
U plus U plus L, di ba? U plus L
Over
over
capital N.
at tingnan natin na B. O ano ang U natin? The upper group. Di, yun yung H. That means 20. Okay? Plus low group 18. Tama ba?
Yes.
So plus 18, 38. Divided by, in this case, ang ginamit kasi ito sa 100 items. Kaya ang denominator niya ay 27 plus 27, 54. Try to divide it by 54. If you divide it by 54, that's correct. Itinry itong test sa 100 students. Tapos ni-rank sila highest to lowest. Kaya ang kino-compute, top 27, bottom 27. Kaya yung capital N is 27 plus 27 is 54. I repeat, if you have your calculator, you can try it. 20 plus 18 is 38. Divided by 54 is 0.70. Tama ba?
Okay.
Yes po.
Okay. Pag tinignan niyo yung difficulty table, yung 0.70 is average difficulty. Okay? Ang evaluation ninyo, ang recommendation ninyo, very acceptable yung item number 1 in terms of difficulty index. Let's go to discrimination index. Again, ito, nakalagay naman kung discrimination index natin is U minus L. Is that correct? U
Yes.
minus L over small n. So, ibig sabihin ito, 20 minus 18 is 2 over 27.
27.
Point, what did you get? Oh, sorry. Ayan, 0.07. Tama ba? Pakitry nyo sa calculator.
Yes po.
0.07, pag tinignan niyo yung discrimination index natin, 0.07 is a low
Limited.
power item, kaya LP. Recommendation niyo, limited in acceptability. I like to inform everybody for an item to be automatically included. Para i-evaluate ninyo sila, every item is evaluated in terms of difficulty and discrimination index. An item that is acceptable in difficulty and at the same time acceptable in discrimination is considered a good item. Okay? Item acceptable in difficulty or discrimination in one is considered a fair item. Pagka good item, automatic, kasama sa final form of the test. Pag fair item, pwedeng isama, pero i-improve or i-revise. Is that clear sa grupo? Hello? Give me feedback.
Yes,
Yes
po.
po.
Okay.
Yes, Doc.
Ulitin ko Acceptable in difficulty, acceptable in discrimination. Ano evaluation nyo?
Good item.
Good item. Acceptable in one, difficulty or discrimination.
Fair item.
Fair item. Not acceptable in difficulty, not acceptable in discrimination. Ano lagay nyo dito?
Fair.
Poor item.
Poor.
Tatlo lang. Good, fair,
Fair.
poor.
Poor.
Another example. Ito, tingnan nyo. Item number 2. Correct answer C. Difficulty 18 plus 11. Okay, divided by 54, the answer is 0.54. If you look at the table, 0.54 is average difficulty. Okay, average difficulty, therefore very acceptable siya. Okay, in terms of discrimination, 18 minus 11 is 7. Divided by 27 is 0.26. So, ano yung ibig sabihin ng AP?
Average power.
Average power, and therefore it is acceptable. Acceptable na siya sa difficulty, very acceptable pa nga. Acceptable pa siya sa discrimination, kaya good item siya. Okay, isa na lang. Tapos we will leave that. Ayan, okay. Let's go to this example. Item number 4, correct answer B. The difficulty 22 plus 19 over 54 is 0.76. Therefore, it is an easy item. It is limited in acceptability. Discrimination 22 minus 19 divided by 27 is 0.11. It is a low power item. Therefore, limited in acceptability. Take note, limited na acceptability sa difficulty, limited pa ang acceptability sa discrimination. Poor item siya. Okay. The rest are other examples. I will not discuss them with you. Pareho lang ng process. Okay? So do you understand how to do item analysis procedure? Any question?
Sir.
Handok.
Dali lang, no? Meron na tayong software ngayon na pwedeng mag-item analyze. Do you have the software in your school?
Yes, sir. Sa sa DepEd, may automatic na po siyang nag-item analysis po.
Very good. If you have that, by all means use it. Tapos,
Yes,
isite nyo na lang
ma'am.
doon kung anong software ang ginamit niya.
But since it is COVID-19 po, we don't have the periodical test, so hindi po namin siya ginagamit. Dahil
Ayun.
po dalawa lang po yung ginigradean po sa ngayon.
So, in that case, you have no choice. Magma-manual computation kayo. No? Madali lang naman. Mahaba lang yung proseso, pero madali lang. Do you agree with me? Madali lang siya. Mahaba lang yung proseso. Pero,
Totally agree po.
bibigyan ko kayo ng complete sets of theoretical discussions, case analysis, and interpretations para mag-guide kayo mabuti. Would you be happy for that?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you po,
Thank you so
Doc.
much po, Doc Ray.
Oo, alam niyo pag-defend niyo na akala natin yung analysis ang doon tayo takot na takot eh. Pero much of the questions will come from methodologies. I have seen thesis pinaulit yung writer because the writer failed to establish the test validity and test reliability. So, let me now discuss with you how to establish test reliability. Apat din ang procedures natin. One is test retest method. Madali lang to. Pag sinabi natin test retest method, it aims test and retest method measures the stability of the test. How do you do it? You construct one test, you give the test twice to the same group of individuals at any interval. Okay, then at the end, correlate the results of the pre-test and the post-test, or test 1 and test 2 using Pearson R, correlation coefficient. If the result is a significant correlation, that is an evidence of test reliability. Madali lang siya, no? I'll show you examples on how to compute later on. So tanda natin, first procedure, test retest method. Second procedure is equivalent forms method. Ito ang medyo mas malurit ng konti. Pumunta na kayo sa madali. Didiscuss ko lang yung apat, pero pili kayo ng madaling gamitin. No? Equivalent forms method measures the equivalence of the test, the two tests. How do you do it? You give two forms of a test to the same group in close succession. Then later on, correlate the results using Pearson correlation coefficient procedure. I will discuss that later. Okay. Third is split half. Oh, another na madaling gamitin ito. So ang choice niyo, suggestion ko, yung first at saka yung third. Ano yung first?
Test
Retest method.
Isang test lang yung i-construct. Okay? Ang kailangan. Ito naman, isang test lang din. You administer the test, tapos i-splitin ninyo. Ang pag-i-split ng test ay odd-numbered items, even-numbered items yung isa. Odd numbered items, test X. Even numbered item, test Y. Split half method measures the internal consistency of the test. Okay? Ito, give a test once, score the equivalent halves of the test, add in even numbered items, correlate the two tests. Use, aba, prepare na kayo for lunch, longganisa. Pwede na makisalo dyan kami ni Dr. Nuki. Sige, tingnan natin ito. Madali lang yung split half, no? One test split into two. Pero wag sa gitna puputulin kasi ordinarily, the first part of the test are the easy questions and the later part will be the more difficult. Kaya pagka hinati ninyo, hati yung easy, hati yung difficult. Add even division. And the final test is Kuder-Richardson test. No? The Kuder-Richardson test measures the internal consistency of the items. May software na nito. Pag nagpa-Quran box alpha kayo ng inyong test, makikita ninyo yung Kuder-Richardson test. Give a test once, score the total test, and apply the Kuder-Richardson formula. Okay, so these are the 4 ways of establishing test reliability. What are the 4 ways again of establishing test reliability?
Test method.
Test method.
Test
Equivalent,
retest,
equivalent form
equivalent
method.
form,
Split half.
split half,
Kuder-Richardson method.
Napunan niyo ba palaging ginagamit? Apply the Pearson correlation coefficient procedure. O kinuha niyo yun sa stat class, no? All right. Anyway, I have included an example para madali niyo makita. If you are using ungrouped data procedures, ito yung very simple formula of a Pearson R. Okay? Yung makikita niyo yung mga symbol, summation, meron kayong result ng test X, meron kayong result ng test Y. If you multiply the two, you get, and then get the sum, you get summation X1. Add the result of the test X, call it summation X. Add the results of the test Y, call it summation Y. And then look at the denominator. N number of cases, square X values, then get the sum. So you have summation X squared. Minus summation X, the sum of X scores, and then you square, times the number of cases, summation Y square, square each Y value, and then get the sum. And then get the sum of the Y scores, and then square it. Wala naman, napakadali naman ito. Ayan lang, ganun lang ang gagawin ninyo. You know, your students may be written here in number or coded as letters. Results of the test in X, results of the test in Y. Ito yung sinasabi ko. You multiply X times Y, you call it XY. Square X, call it X square. Square Y, call it Y square. Then get the sums. Pag nakuha nyo na yung summations, ito na yung computations. Hindi na natin di-discuss, i-trace nyo na lang. Na? Pag di-discuss natin yan, hindi tayo makakatapos. Anyway, andun naman yung examples. Okay? If the results of the Pearson correlation coefficient analysis is a significant coefficient, that is an evidence of test reliability. Okay? Of course, kung split half ang ginagamit, ganito yung proseso. Give a test once, score the equivalent halves, add and even, correlate the two tests. Parang ganito yung table. Ito yung results ng odd even numbered items, even numbered items. Square X, 6 times 6 is 36. Square Y, 5 times 5 is 25. Get the product of the X and the Y, 30. Tapos get the sum. Ayun yung formula. Parang Pearson din. Dali lang, no? Lang kahirap-hirap. Tama ba? Wala nang kumibo.
Reaction.
Hindi, andyan naman yung examples. Pwede nyo i-trace later, ano? I-recompute lang ninyo. So I have, ito yung sinasabi ko, I did my best to give you theoretical discussions, case analysis, and sample computations. Okay? So let's go to Kuda-Richardson naman, binabanggit kanina. Paano ba kinocompute yung Kuda-Richardson test? Sinamarize ko yung steps. Begin by identifying the test items through numbers. Determine the percentage of examinees who answered each item correctly. Call it P. Subtract its percentage under column P from 1 and call it Q. Multiply each entry, in other words, P times Q equals PQ. And then add all the entries in column PQ to obtain summation PQ. O parang mahirap. At tapos ayun yung formula. The formula is defined. Ito. How is it? Ito yung example. Ganito lalabas yung answer niyo. Okay, tingnan nyo ito. Item number 1, sabihin natin out of 100 students, 55 students got the item correct. So 55 over 100 is 0.55. Tama?
Yes, Doc.
Yes po.
Okay, 0.55. Tapos sa inyong Q, 1 minus 0.55 is 0.45. If you multiply this two, you get that value, 0.2475. And then get the sum of summation PQ. Ayun, 1.86. O tapos na, unboxing. Ayan yung computations ng Kuda-Richardson test. Ha? Very easy, no? Sundan nyo na lang, ha? Uli, later on, kung may question kayo, I will entertain all. But allow me to proceed. Baka hindi ako makatapos. Hindi tayo matapos. Okay. Ito naman, kung natatandaan niyo, ito yung procedures ng Pearson R. Hindi, nasa SPSS naman yan eh. Computein nyo na lang yung correlations using the SPSS kung ayaw ninyo mag-manual computations. Ito diniscuss ko sa stat class if you remember. No? Fy, kunin nyo lang yung sum of the frequencies. 1, 2, 3, kaya 3. 1, 2, 1, 4. Tapos get the sum, 87. Assign a new small integral values. Assign positive values above. Assign negative values below. Get the product of the Fy and Y prime. Call it Fy prime. Get the product of the Y prime and Fy prime. Call it Fy prime square. And then summation X prime is computed using the frequency times the X prime value. Yung X prime value nasa baba. Ayun, no? Ito yung X prime. Oh. So that means 1 times 4 is 4. Ito, saan nanggaling itong 4 na ito? Ito. 1 times 0 is 0. 1 times 1 is positive 1. 1 times 3 is positive 3. So positive 1, positive 3, and 0 is 4. Ayun. Last column, summation xy. Madali lang yan. Y prime times summation x prime. 4 times 4 is 16. 3 times 4 is 12. Get the sum. Pag nakuha nyo na yung mga sums, ayun yung computations. Okay? Trace nyo na lang later, no? Paki-check ninyo. Pwede nyo akong tawagan later on kung na-check ninyo na there are errors or items that you would like to correct. And then you prepare the summary of the statistics. So we are done with test development and test validation. Okay. Any questions so far? Otherwise, we'll proceed to the second part, which is the questionnaire development and validation processes. I like to thank my dear co-teachers that majority of you will make use of questionnaire in writing your thesis and dissertations. For those doctoral students who are here, how many of you made use of questionnaire? Majority? Ang gumamit ng questionnaire? Hello, our EDD students? Questionnaire ginamit nyo? Most likely, yan ang gagamitin ninyo. So, I would like to find time to discuss with you questionnaire development and questionnaire validation. We usually find this, no? There are discussions in the chapter 3 methodology of your thesis and dissertations. but almost always the discussion is insufficient and insubstantial. Kaya the panel members would ask the candidate to revise the methodology of questionnaire development and questionnaire validations. This time, my dear co-teachers, allow me to proceed to questionnaire development. I have summarized questionnaire development into, shall we say, 3 important parts or elements. The first part is what we call preliminary considerations. The second part is the development or the translation process. Actually, ito yun. Development, ito siya, and translation process. And the third part is the validation process. So let me discuss the steps. Okay. Now, after constructing, when you develop your questionnaire, by the way, you begin by asking yourself to identify, or you have to identify the construct of interest. What are the competencies? What are the construct that your questionnaire would want to assess? And of course, you have to surf or review the literature. Fine, if there is a validated questionnaire already available, by all means, dear co-teachers, use it. Huwag na kayong mag-reinvent ng wheel. No? Kung meron kayong makitang validated questionnaire na that can be used in your paper, if your answer is yes, although kadalasan yan in different language, kaya hindi siguro magiging culture safe, use the questionnaire. And the most that you can do is to translate it, no, in a language that your respondent would understand. Ngayon, in case you don't find an available validated questionnaire that you can make use of in your paper, okay, your answer is no. That's the only time you will think of developing a questionnaire. I like to emphasize, if there are standardized or previously validated questionnaire, by all means, use it. So these are the preliminary considerations. Very simple, no? I have summarized it. Okay, define the construct or the competencies that the instruments that the questionnaire is supposed to answer. Okay, find out if there are available or validated, standardized, or validated questionnaire. If there is, use it. If there is none, that's the only time you will think about developing the instrument. Okay, second part, the development process. You know, you have to establish if your answer is yes. In other words, meron ka nakitang valid instrument, but in a different language. Ang susunod na gagawin mo is to establish an expert committee, because you have to translate yung sinasabi natin, contextualize. Dapat maging culture fit yung questionnaire mo. No? Translate the questionnaire and then make use of the forward or the backward translation na sinasabi natin. And then afterwards, pilot test. Ito medyo mas matatagal kayo ng konti. If you constructed your own questionnaire, establish an expert committee. Again, I like to emphasize, when you say expert, these are people who are in the know, technically qualified, professionally competent, and experienced. Afterwards, identify the dimensionality of the construct. How are the construct measured or quantified? Determine the questionnaire format. As much as you can, we suggest that a multiple choice format be utilized. No? Or at least meron kayong Likert scaling technique na ginamit. Afterwards, you develop the questionnaire items. Determine the questionnaire length, and then revise and review the initial pool of items, and then pilot test. Yan ang second part, the development process. of the questionnaire. The third part is the validation process. Ito yung questionnaire reliability. There are three types that you can use. No? Internal consistency analysis, test, retest, reliability analysis, and inter-rater reliability analysis. I will discuss with you after this the statistical techniques that can be used in identifying the internal consistency of the questionnaire, the test, retest reliability, and the inter-rater reliability. Okay? If there is already one, ipapa-evaluate pa rin natin yung content, the constructs, and other validation requirements. Otherwise, meron kayong subsequent validations na gagawin. Okay, siguro it will be better if I now proceed to the specific statistical techniques that you can use. Type of statistical analysis. There are two fundamental issues that have to be established in your questionnaire. These are validity and reliability of the questionnaire. Questionnaire validity actually refers to the extent to which the instrument measures what it is intended to measure. Now, you are familiar with the definition, correct? I like to think you are familiar with that. The extent to which an instrument measures what it is supposed to measure is what we call the validity index of the questionnaire. All right. On the other hand, reliability is intended to test the overall consistency of an instrument. This is according to Tavakol and Denick 2011. And how do you analyze validity and reliability? There are three statistical techniques in doing this. One is applying the Delphi technique. The other is using the Kappa technique. And finally, the Cronbach's alpha coefficient technique. I like to discuss each technique in greater detail. Let's start with the Delphi technique. The Delphi technique is widely used and an accepted method for gathering data from respondents within the domain of expertise. Basically, consensus on a topic can be reached if a certain percentage of votes fall within a specific range. Normally, ang ginagawa natin dyan, we prepare an evaluation tool. And then we submit it. You submit the questionnaire for content validation of experts together with an evaluation tool. I'll show you an example. The use of mean score based on a Likert scale is strongly favored. The mean appears to be inherently best suited to reflect the convergence of opinion of the experts. Kung tatlo yung in-invite ninyong experts, dapat may convergence of opinion yung tatlo. No? Better kung yung tatlo mag-approve or at least two. And then yung isa ay i-consider nyo na lang yung kanyang mga comments and recommendations. It has been suggested that the mean has to be 3.25 or higher, according to Sue and Stanford 2007, to be able to claim that there is, or to be able to claim that the experts reached a consensus about the validity of the test item. I hope that's clear. No? To establish the validity, one statistical technique that we use is the Delphi technique. The purpose of using this is to obtain the consensus of the expert on certain topics. And you claim that a consensus is reached if a mean of 3.25 or higher is obtained in a 4-point Likert scale that looks like this. The Delphi technique, the services of experts would be needed, and you would ask the experts to evaluate the validity of the items in terms of clarity, coherence, relevance of each of the statements from 1 to 4 points in a Likert type scale. Its classification is to be understood as follows. Clarity refers to the extent to which the item is easily understood. And this means the syntax and the semantics used are appropriate. Coherence means the item shows logical relationship with the aim or the indicator it is measuring. And finally, relevance tells that the item is essential or important, that it aims or it has to be included in the instrument. Okay, ito yung sample, no? The statements will be assessed by the raters under the following categories. Likert 1, scale 1 does not meet the criteria. Scale 2, low level of consensus is reached. No? Scale 3, moderate level, and scale 4, high level, as shown in table 3. Ito yung sample rubric na gagamitin ninyo. Okay? If you have a 50-item questionnaire, susulat nyo rito 1 to 50 under the column 18. Item, sorry. Kung 100 items yung questionnaire nyo, sulat nyo rito yung 100 items. 1 to 100. Opposite each item, ipaparate ninyo sa experts, no, in terms of clarity, coherence, and relevance using a 4-point Likert scale. In the end, kukunin ninyo yung mean assessment of the experts. You compute for the grand mean. If the grand mean is 3.25 or higher, that shows questionnaire validity using the Delphi technique. Is that clear? Meron ba yung question using the Delphi technique?
No
Malinaw
question
ba?
po.
No
Malinaw.
question. You
No
understand?
Yes po.
Very good. No? So to establish questionnaire validity, use the Delphi technique. Another procedure that can be used is using the place Kappa technique. How is it different from Delphi technique? Yung Delphi technique, ang ginagamit natin, ang ini-evaluate natin ay consensus or convergence of opinion. Consensus or convergence of opinion of the experts. In a place Kappa technique, it evaluates the concordance or the agreement between multiple raters, among the experts. So essentially, parehas din. Concordance, agreements, consensus. So it's a choice between the Delphi technique or the place Kappa technique. This is a measure of agreement that can be expected above chance. Agreement can be thought of as follows. If a fixed number of people assign numerical ratings to a number of items, then the Kappa will give a measure for how consistent the ratings are. Table 1 describes the benchmark scale that Landis and Koch, as cited by Diaz, proposed. One of the most widely used benchmark scale to value the degree of agreement among raters. And this is a function of the Kappa. Ito yung benchmark scale ng Kappa. Okay? You will compute for the coefficient and you will interpret the coefficient as follows. Coefficient between 0.81 to 1.00 is almost perfect agreement. Very valid. No? 0.61 to 0.80, substantial agreement is reached by the experts. 0.41 to 0.60, moderate agreement was solicited from the experts. Lower than 0.41 is not acceptable. This is, the source of this is Landis and Koch, as cited by Diaz et al. 2018. So how do you do it? No? Parang ito yun, choosing of alternative. Excuse me. Sorry. Ayan. No? Ito na yung ginawa natin na how you would do. So, paparate ninyo uli sila. And then afterwards, you compute for the kappa and you interpret the kappa using this. Okay? Agreements lang ang kinukuha natin. Again, the mean values can be used in computing this. All right. And ang ginagamit nating index of questionnaire reliability is almost always the Cronbach's alpha or the Coder-Richardson test. The Cronbach's alpha technique is a measure of internal consistency of the questionnaires in order to validate its reliability. It is commonly used in questionnaires with multiple Likert questions whose answers are neither correct nor incorrect. But its participants chooses the alternative that best depicts his or her own views on the construct intended to explore. Internal consistency, my dear co-teachers, refers to the extent to which a set of items in a questionnaire measures the same concept or construct. Therefore, it is connected to the interrelatedness of the items within the test. Okay? If the items in a questionnaire are correlated to each other, the alpha value is increased. These values range between 0 to 1, in which 0 means no reliability at all, and 1 means total reliability. The closer the alpha value to 1, the higher the inventory's reliability. Table 2 represent the values proposed by George and Mallory. By the way, it's about time to tell you that there are softwares that can be used in computing or analyzing Cronbach's reliability index. No? Let me show you the table. Ayan. This is the table that can be used in analyzing the internal consistency of the item. Using the software, you compute for the coefficient. And then you interpret the coefficient or the alpha on the basis of the following. Coefficients or alpha between 0.90 and higher, means excellent reliability index. No? 0.80 to 0.89, good reliability index of the test or the questionnaire, sorry. 0.70 to 0.79, acceptable ang index. Kaya you will notice during oral defenses, the panel members will ask you, what is your Cronbach's alpha? The lowest acceptable is 0.70. If you get lower than this, you have to make some revisions and revalidations of the items. Cronbach's alpha coefficient between the range of 0.60 to 0.69 are questionable. 0.50 to 0.59, poor. Lower than 0.5 is unacceptable. So this is how you interpret. Normally, hindi kito manual compute. Just like place Kappa, ginagamitan ito ng software. No? If you have your statistician, you can ask your statisticians to compute. Okay? All right. Let me continue. Sorry. This technique, remember, is a measure of internal consistency of the items. Okay? And as a matter of rule, Cronbach's alpha coefficient must be 0.7 or higher. Kaya if you are using standardized tests, tingnan nyo din kung ano yung result ng Kappa, and then you also examine, look at the Delphi technique, no? The results, and then the Kappa index for the place Kappa technique, and Cronbach's coefficient. You have to note this, at pag nag-prepare kayo ng chapter 3 ninyo, it is always part of chapter 3 or methodology of the study under instruments of the study. Yung instruments of the study is never complete unless the researcher is able to discuss in full detail 3 items. What are they? First, you name the questionnaire that you use. Second, you discuss the contents of the questionnaire. Minsan yan, divided into 3 parts. Part 1 deals with, part 3 presents the, part 4 okay, highlights the. Dinidiscuss ninyo yung contents of the instrument. And finally, you provide information on the validity and reliability index of the questionnaire. So that's where you use, that's where you present your, what are you going to present? The Delphi, the validity index using the Delphi technique or the place Kappa technique, and the Cronbach's alpha. For validity, Delphi technique and place Kappa technique. For reliability, Cronbach's alpha coefficient is used. Okay, maybe we can spend the remaining time for some other questions that you would like to be clarified in the topics that I have presented. Let me turn over the floor or the table to our moderator. Is Dr. Alvin still with
Hi,
us?
sir. Thank you so much for that very intensive discussion about subjecting the instrument for validity and reliability testing.
Reliability.
No? You weren't able to, you were able to discuss the different reliability testing, hindi lang Cronbach's alpha. May bago pa silang natutunan kasi kadalasan Cronbach's alpha lang. So now we are going to open the platform for any clarification as regards to the development of a valid and reliable instrument. As we mentioned a while back, and as emphasized by Dr. Ray, it is important that when you propose a research paper, either you are in the thesis or non-thesis stream, it is important that you will also be having a reliable and valid instrument. The only difference between thesis and non-thesis is that when you are in the non-thesis, you are still going to come up with an action research, a policy research paper, but you need to undergo the standard process in coming up with a scientific research paper. And one of them is ensuring that your data gathering tool or your instrument is valid or reliable. So that's why yung ating mga MPA dito, in-invite na natin para kahit naka-non-thesis kayo, para ma-prepare kayo in the future sa inyong paggawa ng policy research paper. We're now opening the platform for any comment or clarification. If you would like to say something, just unmute your audio and then state your name and your program para ma-recognize namin kayo. Anyone, please? And it was mentioned by Dr. Ray that instrument may be in the form of a test na very helpful sa mga teachers in the future na magde-develop ng mga test items for students. Pero I also have to agree with Miss Vivian na right now, dalawa lamang ang kanilang ginagamit. Si Miss Vivian nga pa yun. It's students' written output and
performance task po, Doc.
So, although in the future, magagamit nyo pa rin naman yan. It would also be nice na you know how to subject your test items for reliability testing. But it's true also that during the pandemic, ay hindi masyado tayo mag-administer ng mga multiple choice questions. Pero matatapos din yung pandemic at magagamit itong topic na to. But what is more interesting in the discussion is subjecting your questionnaire with the Likert scale, either 5-point, 7-point, 10-point, depending on the source, subjecting the instrument for validity or reliability testing. I think that was also well discussed by Dr. Ray. Kasi karamihan sa inyo, lalo yung nasa EDD program, ang karamihan na nakita ko gagamit ng questionnaire. And sabi nga natin, if you're going to use a questionnaire that is not lifted from a previously conducted research, meaning hindi pa siya nag-undergo na reliability and validity testing, that doesn't stop you from developing your own or constructing your own instrument, but it has to undergo the tedious process of validation and reliability testing. Yun yung highlight ng ating discussion for today. So any more clarification? Let me hear from the EDD group. Ma'am Cecil, Dr. Cecil, do you have any clarification?
Yes, Doc. Good morning. Good morning po, Doc. Okay. I was just wondering po kasi, hi, hello po, Doc.
Hello, how are you? Nice to see you, Dr. Cecil.
I was just wondering po if we could have also a training or a seminar perhaps on about distractors on how to create multiple the choices. There are times po kasi at the moment we are really creating for alternative learning system. We are preparing for the readiness test. But as of this moment, we are also preparing the field on how to be ready for the upcoming national exam. So usually these are teacher-made tests, but we really wanted to equip them and to help them out to provide technical assistance. Pagdating sa multiple choice, paano pumapasok ang mga distractors na hindi giveaway ang choices po. Kasi
Very
yun ang
good.
medyo tricky po. Thank you so much, Doc. But this one, actually nagsusulat po ako. Thank you so much po.
Dr. Cecil, if you remember, you are right. The rule of thumb is if there are 4 choices, the 4 choices must all appear correct answer, except that there is one best. No? So how do you determine effective distractors of items? That's one good topic that maybe you can submit to Dr. Alvin for consideration.
Thank you so much, Doc. Kasi I happen to see the presentations po. I've seen the word distractors po for the options. So while I'm listening to your presentation, sabi ko it might be helpful also to us, especially to provide technical assistance kasi we do not know the demarcation line kung this one is really acceptable or masyadong obvious na ang mga options natin for that. Thank you so much, Doc.
Okay, you're welcome. Nice to see you. Good luck.
Ms. Cecil, actually, slightly, Dr. Ray was able to discuss how to identify items in the multiple choice that are already valid and acceptable, rather, that are acceptable. Usually, Star Domingo ay
Tama, wala akong pera. Bakit
wait lang, ah. Si Mrs. Star Domingo ay naging star ng ingay ng sounds. Usually, Ma'am Cecil, when we do an item analysis, there are 2 indices that are being looked into: the difficulty and the discrimination indices. And the rule of thumb is that we do not include, kasi the goal of item analysis is to come up with an item bank. These are collections of reliable items already. And the rule is that the rule when we construct options, it must not be very difficult and it must not be very easy. Kaya kadalasan dyan, if you use a software, the software will tell you whether which items are very difficult and whether which items are of average difficulty and yung mga very easy. So ang nare-recommend ng literature, tinatanggal natin yung mga nasa extremes, yung mga very difficult and very easy. Yung nasa average difficulty lang ang ating mini-maintain. No? That is for the difficulty index. In discrimination naman, the software can also tell you which options or which choices can discriminate good and not so good students. Kaya nga, it's good that Dr. Ray was able to present the manual computation, including the ranges of acceptability. That is very good. And also, Vivian was correct when he shared that there is a software that upon inputting, for example, all the answers of the students, and you just need to input the key to correction, and by just clicking few options in that software, bibigyan ka na niya ng discrimination and difficulty indices, including analysis of each item. Kaya maganda, actually hanapin ko lang, sir, alam ko meron ako sa laptop ko noon. Maganda, one time I'm gonna share with you also the software para yung sinasabi
so much,
ni Miss Ivy.
That would be very helpful,
Yeah,
Dr.
very much.
Yeah, but it's very helpful also that Dr. Ray was able to provide you a solid theoretical underpinning of instrumentation. This is the foundation kasi. Naglabasan lang naman kasi itong mga software na to nung naging technologically oriented na tayong lahat in 21st century. Pero before, wala naman ito eh. And we are thankful to technology kasi kumbaga napapadali yung buhay natin. But we will never understand the result of this technology if we do not have a good foundation of this theoretical underpinning behind instrumentation or development of test questions. So siguro one time I'm going to share with you the software para makita nyo kung paano makita doon yung mga tatanggaling items, yung mga i-retain na items, or item banking. We call it item banking. Yeah, that's a good point, Miss Cecil. Any more question?
Doc Alvin, there's no question po. Additional lang po, because we already, sa public school po, sa senior high, pioneer po kasi ako na nakapasok. We adapt po na during the non-pandemic days po, permit po na i-discuss lang pong konti. Pwede po ba, Doc?
Sure. May time pa naman tayo. It's 11:54. May 6 minutes pa tayo.
Opo. Bali po yung parts po ng test of specification, ginagamit po namin content area, tapos po number of hours, kung ilang hours po namin diniscuss yung topic, tapos po percentage, kung ilang percent po ng topic na yon na na-discuss po namin sa estudyante, tapos po number of item points. Bali po, meron po siyang computation sa item specification. Ang ginagamit po namin, Bloom's Advanced Taxonomy po. Bali po, nag-uumpisa po siya sa remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Yun po yung nadagdag sa kanya. Bali po yung legend niya, 2 lang po. Meron po siyang set of multiple choice and 10 items po na essay. Bali po 50 item test po. Yung mismong binibigay po namin.
Yeah, I think
per quarter po. Quarter po yun.
Yeah, I think what you're sharing is another model, the revised model of Bloom's. Iba lang yung ginamit.
Bago na po siya.
Iba lang yung ginamit na categories of question, but yeah, almost the same.
Essentially, they mean the same thing.
Yeah. So, pwede rin naman yun. Yeah. Pero what you're sharing also, it is important that the number of test items or test questions must be incongruent with the time allotment for every topic.
Right.
Ibig sabihin, the topics must be represented by the number of questions depending on the number of hours that the topics need to be discussed. Yun ang pinaka-importante doon. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Miss Vivian.
Sure po, Doc. Salamat.
All right. Meron pa? Of course, yung ating MPA, hindi masyado magtatanong yan kasi more of questionnaire development yan. Rarely do they develop yung mga multiple choice items. Usually pang pang teachers. Kaya sa kanila ay questionnaire development, which I think was also discussed by Dr. Ray. Yung sinasabi ni Dr. Ray kanina na mga validity, content validity, and then later on, the subject sa Cronbach's alpha or reliability testing. So yun ang ginagawa for questionnaire, no? So, meron pa bang tanong or any more addition? We have 3 more minutes. It's 11:57 in my clock. Mukhang saktong-sakto yung time natin. Meron pa ba kayong tanong? O kung wala na, i-open na yung camera para makapag-gallery view picture na tayo with Dr. Reynaldo Cruz. Jen? May I request everyone to open their camera, webcam, para makita yung inyong attendance. Ayan. Tapos I would suggest later on, yung mga attend ng afternoon session, kindly put your full name. No? Full name para ma-recognize namin kayo. Sige. Jen, ikaw na facilitate ng picture taking. First group? First group kasi there are 4 in my gallery, there are 4 gallery. Or how do you call it? Screen. Yes.
1, 2, 3.
All right, second group. Smile lang ng smile, baka madaanan yung mukha ninyo sa camera.
Count 1, 2, 3.
All right. Sige.
po.
Third
Ay,
screen.
ano ba yan? May third pa.
May flash yan, huwag kayong pipikit.
Another 1, 2, 3. Captured po.
Okay, last one. Kasi 4, ano yan, Jen?
Yes, sir. 1, 2, 3. Okay, sir.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. And kung wala na kayong tanong kay Dr. Ray, we would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude for the wisdom and that Dr. Ray has shared to us. It was very informative and it will be very useful, especially for those who are involved in the academy and as well as for those MPA students who will be writing their research paper in the future. Kasi gagawa rin sila ng questionnaire. So meron na silang additional knowledge ngayon, no? So Dr. Ray, pwede ba natin bigyan si Dr. Ray ng virtual clap? Pakita naman ng virtual clap natin dyan.
Thank you, Dr. Ray. Thank you,
Virtual
Dr.
clap.
Luffy.
Thank you, Dr. Ray.
Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you po, Dr. Ray.
See you in your oral defenses.
Thank you po, Dr. Ray.
Thank you,
Thank you po. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you po.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
God bless. Ingat po.
Okay, so before we end our class, I'd like to remind the MPA group that this afternoon we will begin at 1 p.m. So you already have the program and you know the speaker already, but I will be opening the platform by 12:30 para pwede na kayong mag-log in. Pero for the meantime, i-close ko muna to dahil may another link ako for the MPA group. But for those EDD students na nakita niyo yung mga topic kanina na i-discuss ni Madam ASDS, kung gusto niyo umattend, pwede rin naman. Maganda rin namang, lalo yung mga officials ng DepEd, we are considered public administrators din naman eh. Iba lang yung nature ng work natin, pero public administrator din tayo. So with that, Dr. Ray, maraming salamat po.
My pleasure. Thank you also to everyone.
And have a happy lunch. And keep safe, everyone. See you later sa
Thank you,
NP.
Dr. Nuki. Thank you, Dr. Ray.
Thank you po.
Thank you, Dr. Ray.
Doc Luffy, Dr. Ray.
Thank
you po.
Thank you, Dr. Ray, and thank you,
Thank you very much.
Keep safe, keep safe.
Thank you po. Thank you. Ingat po.
See you this afternoon.
God bless po.
God bless.